In number 6, we've got this matrix, and this is going to be our x column, our y column, and our constant column over here. So when we rewrite this in terms of a system, we're going to have 3x minus 2y equals 9. So let's write that. We're going to have 3x minus 2y equals 9. And then we're going to have 1x minus 1y equals 5. So we'll have x minus y equals 5. Problem number 7, we want to get this matrix here into RREF, row reduced echelon form. So we're going to start here. We've got a 1 here and zeros below, so that first column is already done. Move over to the right and down. We've got a 1 in this position, so that 1 is going to be our pivot element. And then what we need to do is we need to get zeros in the other positions. Now we've got a 0 below already, we just need a 0 right above it. So we'll get that 0 by taking this number here, the 2, taking its opposite, negative 2, and multiplying it through the pivot row, and then adding it to the first row. Here's what we mean. We're going to take row 1 is going to become negative 2 times the pivot row plus row 1. Right? We're going to take the opposite of this number, negative 2, multiply it by the pivot row right here. There's our negative 2 times row 2. And then add that to row 1. So let's do it. It'll look like this. Multiplied through that middle row there by negative 2. We'll get 0, negative 2, negative 2, negative 14. Let's circle that. And then we're going to add that eventually to row 1. Okay, so you see what we did here? We wanted 0 here, so we'll take the opposite of that number, negative 2, multiply it through our pivot row. This will give us a negative 2 here. And then negative 2 plus 2, that'll give us a 0 in that position. So let's do that. We are going to get, all right, now it's going to be the first row added to this new row. So component-wise, first and first, 1 and 0, that gives us a 1. And then 2 and negative 2, that gives us a 0. That's what we wanted. And then we'll have a 4 and a negative 2. 4 plus negative 2 is 2. There's our line. And then we'll have 5 plus a negative 14. That'll give us a negative 9. Our second row stays the same, 0, 1, 1, 7. And third row stays the same, 0, 0, 1, and 2. So we've got some progress here. Now, we started with a 1 in this position, zeros below. Over and down, we've got a 1 in this position on that diagonal, zeros in other places. Now, over and down, from here over and down to that main diagonal, we have a 1 here already, so we don't need any divisions. So right here, this is going to be our pivot element, and that means we need a 0 here and a 0 here. So to get the 0 here, we're going to take the opposite of this number, negative 2, multiply through negative 2 our pivot row. So row 1 is going to become negative 2, the opposite of that number, times row 3, our pivot row this time, plus row 1. And here's what that's going to look like. So multiply everything here by negative 2. Going to get some zeros. We'll get 0, 0, negative 2, negative 4. We'll circle that, and we're going to add that to row 1 eventually. Now we want a 0 here. So take the opposite of this number, like we always do, take the opposite of that number, multiply it through the pivot row, and then add it to that row. So here's what this is going to look like. So row 3 is going to become negative 1 times row 2 plus row 3. And that's going to look like this. So I'm going to multiply everything here, that row 3, by negative 1, right, the opposite of that number. So we're going to get 0, 0, negative 1, negative 2. I'll circle that and draw my arrow up here so I know where I'm going to add it. So let's make these operations. First row. So first row is going to be the original first row plus this new one. So component-wise, 1 plus 0 is a 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus negative 2, that's a 0, that's what we were looking for. There's our line. And then negative 9 minus 4, negative 9 plus negative 4 is negative 13. So we've got our first row. Now on to the second row. So the second row is going to be that current second row added to this one. We're going to add these two. So component-wise, first and first, 0 plus 0, that's 0. Then second and second, 1 plus 0 is a 1. And then 1 and negative, nope, let's go all the way down. 1 and negative 1, that's a 0. So we'll get a 0 here. And then our constants, we'll have a 7 and a negative 2. 7 plus negative 2 is 5. And our third row stays the same. That's the pivot row. So we'll have 0, 0, 1, and 2. And we can read off these solutions here. We're going to get x equals negative 13, y is 5, and z is 2. And you see where those are coming from? 1x, no y and no z, so 1x is negative 13. There it is. No x's, 1y, no z's, so 1y is 5. And then no x's, no y's, but 1z is 2. So in this problem here, number 8, what we have is this system here, and we want to use pencil technology. We're going to do with our pencil to put this matrix, this system into matrix form. Actually, let's do that right now. So just reading down these columns, right, the coefficients, I got a 1 and a 2. So in the first column, I'm going to put a 1 and a 2. The y column, I've got a 6 and a 4, right, 6 and 4. So we'll put a 6 and a 4, a line for the equal sign, and then our constant column, we'll put a 3 and a negative 6. So we'll get a 3 and a negative 6. So by pencil, let's RREF this. We've already got a 1 in this position, so that right there is going to be our pivot element. And then what we need to do is get a 0 here. So we can get a 0 here if we take the opposite of this number, negative 2, and multiply it through the pivot row. And that is going to look like this. Row 2, we're going to change that one, is going to become negative 2 times row 1 plus row 2. And that's going to look like this. So take negative 2, multiply it through that pivot row. So negative 2 all the way through here. So that will give us negative 2, negative 12, negative 6. Circle that, and we're going to add that one to row 2. So let's do that now. First row stays the same, so we'll get 1, 6, line 3. And now, adding the current row 2 to the new row 2, we will get, right, 2 plus negative 2 is a 0. We'll get a 0 here. And then 4 plus negative 12 is negative 8. And then negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12. So some progress. We've got our first column completed. Now move over and down. We want this to be a 1. So we're going to have to divide this by negative 8. So let's see what we can write here. How about if we write that row 2 is going to become the current row 2 divided by negative 8. So if we divide each one of these numbers by negative 8, we are going to get, let's see, what are we going to get here? 0 divided by negative 8 is 0. And then negative 8 divided by negative 8, that's going to be a 1. And then negative 12 divided by negative 8, well, negative divided by negative is going to be positive. So now we have our 1 in our pivot position, and we want to get a 0 up here by doing this. We're going to take negative 6, right, the opposite of this number, multiply it through our pivot row. Will look like this. So everything gets in the pivot row gets multiplied by negative 6. We'll have 0, negative 6, and then negative 6 times 3 halves. Well, negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Let's circle that, and we are going to add that to our row 1. And doing so will give us this matrix. So component-wise, first and first, 1 plus 0 is 1. Then second and second, 6 and negative 6, that's a 0. That's what we were looking for. And then third and third, 3 plus negative 9, that's a negative 6. Second row stays the same, 0, 1, 3 halves. So it looks like our solution is, right, from the first row we'll get 1x is negative 6, so we'll get x is negative 6. And from the second row, we're going to get 1y is 3 halves. So y is equal to 3 halves. What we're going to do in number 9 is we're going to take this system here and put this into a matrix and then use our calculator to put it into RREF. So essentially what we're going to do here is convert this to a matrix and then RREF that matrix. So just reading down the columns for coefficients, 1, 2, 1. So first column will be 1, 2, 1. Second column will be negative 1, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, negative 3, negative 2. And the third column, these coefficients, 3, 11, and 8. So we'll have 3, 11, and 8, vertical line, and then the column of our constants, 3, 4, 6. 3, 4, 6. Now we're going to go into the calculator and enter, say, into matrix A. So what are we going to do here? So how to get to the calculator? We're going to do second matrix, over to edit, choose number 1 or enter, matrix A, and matrix A, we'll have to put in the size, right? This size is a 3 by 4. Press enter, and it will drop the cursor down to that first position. So type in these numbers in: 1, enter, negative 1, enter, 3, enter, 3, enter. You know, I can't do it here. I just haven't figured out how to do this on the iPad and get my calculator on the iPad. So anyway, put that matrix in, and then once you get to this 6, be sure to, when you press enter and enter it, be sure to do a second quit to get out of there. You're out of the matrix editor now. So now you want to perform some operation on this, so we are going to get that operation. So go to second matrix, right, back to second matrix, over to math, and then you're going to scroll down to item B, or scroll up to item B to get RREF. So you're going to get the RREF command, and when you press that, this comes up on your calculator with the parentheses. And now do a second matrix again, and now you just want the name of the matrix. You just want to input the matrix. We're not doing any math yet. We're not editing. You just want that matrix. So just press enter or 1, and this A comes up. The matrix A comes up. It's a good idea to close the parentheses right above the 9. You'll find the parentheses, and then press enter. So when I did that, this is what I got here. I got this matrix here, but look at this last row, 0, 0, 0, 1. So what that's telling us is that 0 is equal to 1, which of course we know is false, and that means in this case there's no solution. There's no one point at which all three of these planes, these three flat surfaces, intersect. Now, if you're looking a little harder to see what happened here, let's go back up to the original system. So look what we did here. Take the second row. It's kind of hidden what we did. You got to look closely. Take the second row minus the first row. 2x minus x is x in the third row. Negative 3y minus negative y, so negative 3y plus y is negative 2y. And then 11z minus 3z is the 8z, and then the 4 minus 3 is a 1, not the 6. So instead of like what we've done in classes, maybe we doubled a row, tripled a row, we added 2 rows, but now we're taking 1 row and subtracting it. So the third row is not really an independent equation. It's a combination of these two, so we expect no solution.